IGLTA developed a magnificent survey that was so useful for governments, destinations, and companies to understand what we already knew, that LGBT plus travelers are among the first ones to travel again after any crisis. We saw that after the 2008 crisis, after 9/11, and the pandemic was no different.
Welcome to Truth Behind Travel Podcast. I'm Dolores Semeraro, and this is my weekly show where tourism, travel, and hospitality industry professionals meet to discuss and share marketing strategies as they reshape the future of travel. If you want to learn the truth directly from the leaders and the doers of this industry, you are in the right place. Before you dive into today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. And while you're on it, go on and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Truth Behind Travel Podcast. Hello and welcome to Truth Behind Travel Podcast, my fellow industry leaders, travel professionals, and I'm sure you're out there listening, passionate travelers. I'm your host, Dolores Semeraro, and today we're opening a whole different chapter across the many topics that we have discussed on this podcast. Today we are getting to know more about the purposeful work of Queer Destinations, a leading global LGBTQ plus tourism company that provides consulting and marketing strategies to destinations and tourism companies around the world on the LGBTQ plus travel segment. My guest today is not only the founder of Queer Destinations, but he is a pioneer in promoting LGBTQ plus tourism around the world, as well as being a passionate serial entrepreneur. If you're ready to learn how to actively promote your tourism and travel business across the LGBTQ plus segment, develop and implement responsible policies towards the LGBTQ plus people, do not go anywhere. My guest today is a generous speaker. He speaks fast and passionately, and I personally learned a lot from this conversation, so I hope you will too. Join me in welcoming Oriol Pamies, founder of Queer Destinations. Welcome back to the show and welcome, Oriol. Thank you so much for taking the time in to connect.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We met a few months back at the Tourism Innovation Summit in Sevilla, and I heard you speaking of so passionately about the LGBTQ plus travel segment and the possibilities that many destinations around the world are really not tapping into yet, as of yet, and what are the potentials, in fact. So I had to have you on the podcast, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation today. Plus, we're both in Spain as we record in different locations, but I think let's call it serendipity in a way.
The fact that we met at TIS, speaking about what is the future for travel and getting to have a space on that conversation I think is very important, very crucial, because people are just now starting to understand what is the huge potential of the segment. And I think it's so important to have a place on the table to be able to make sure that governments, destinations, and companies are getting to finally get their hands onto understanding the complexity and the huge opportunity that the LGBT segment has.
We had a conversation not long ago on the podcast with Felipe Cardenas, the chairman of the board of IGLTA. And in that conversation, so much came up about the opportunities and also the conversations that needs to happen at the tourism leadership level in order to facilitate not the thinkers, but the doers of the industry. So today we're gonna tap into that as well. But before we do that, I know you are a travel butterfly. You travel around the world 365 days. As I was telling you before, it's nearly impossible to pin you down. So I'm really glad we're making time for this. And just share with us, what is your background? Where in the tourism industry, what were the choices that led you to create Queer Destinations? And then let's talk about Queer Destinations.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think for me, travel has been something that has been always a part of my motivation. From the very first startup I created back in the time when I was 19 years old, travel was already a big portion of my business model. And as I evolved and I started tapping into the LGBTQ plus marketing, I understood that there was like a huge gap on the market for that. I joined the board of IGLTA 6 years ago. And by being there, I understood that huge corporations, the main destinations all over the world, are getting into IGLTA and coming to the convention every year. And they're learning about case studies, best practices, but then at the end of the day, next year, they're back without being able to actually put anything into action. I understood there was a piece of the puzzle missing on who is actually the player that is helping them create an action plan to amplify everything that they understand in terms of potential, but how do you bring it back into your plan for the company? And I think that that was like our big role in this. I think that definitely there was an opportunity for us to make things easy. In the same way that with sustainability a few years back, everyone started to understand that sustainability is a non-negotiable. The question is how a destination becomes sustainable, how a company becomes sustainable, and that is complex. So with diversity and inclusion and the LGBTQ plus market, it's the exact same. And we are coming into play just to make sure that that path is easy, it's clear, it's trackable, and it's aligned also with the UN WTO standards, with IGLTA standards, and making sure that everything that UN is setting as the sustainable development goals is aligned with that as well. So I think that for us, that finding that gap was key, and it has been one of the elements behind our success.
Let's go back to the very first days of when you created queer destinations. What was the intention behind it? Like, what the initial intentions? Because over time, the organization has grown exponentially, and rightly so, has had opportunities to develop in different countries of the world. But at the back at the very beginning, how did it feel to create something groundbreaking, something that didn't exist before? Was it that easy?
Well, it didn't feel like that back then. What we did and the essence of the project was actually, how do you really work to get closer to the LGBT plus segment? What is the key elements? And we reverse engineered that perfect processing onto a method that was the base to create queer destinations to make it easy for anyone, governments, destinations, companies. So really, we started understanding what was the need, and then reverse engineering that need, making sure that it was being done on a genuine way, and making sure that pinkwashing was out of the picture. So the key of queer destinations when it was created, when it was merely an idea in a PowerPoint presentation, was actually, what does it take to really welcome right an LGBT plus traveler if you are a government, a destination, or a company? And we reverse engineered that idea and that concept into a method that was the base of what we created as a company. And I think that that has been the key element of how we constructed the business. Of course, as you mentioned, it evolved. We grew so much from that, but the essence is still there, and it's for us a non-negotiable. We never skip the method. We know that there's one method that, according to international standards, is the one to follow. And every destination is different, but we make sure that we follow that rule and that path, and that has proved to be successful for us.
Are you referring to the badge of distinction that Queer Destination gives to those organizations and institutions that really wants to learn first before being, they want to learn and therefore being an LGBTQ plus friendly destination?
So I'm referring one step prior to that. That was
Okay.
a thing that was created afterwards. But when we talk about the method comes into, first of all, yes, sensitivity, it's key. And the way we are proving that someone has gone through our sensitivity training is providing the badge. But sensitivity is like the key, but then we work towards analysis. And analysis is key for us because not everyone is ready for the same type of traveler. And one of the beauties of our segment is diversity in itself. So there is a lot more than what we have in our mind of what an LGBT plus traveler is. We are a lot more than gay men and lesbian women traveling. There's so many buyer personas within the LGBT plus segment that are completely undervalued. And that is what we are tapping into. So what we do when we do the analysis for a destination, for instance, we'll come in and like review average stay, average spend, flight connectivity. What products do they have right now that tap into this segment? What products we can adapt, create, or attract to the destination for different type of segments, acquisition power. And then we build 4-year plans to make sure that that is correctly developed and communicated. And what we're trying to do is that every destination has different assets, different attributes. It's unique for itself. So we're trying to make sure that in every country, there are destinations for everyone in the community. So I would say that sensitivity is the first step. We go into the analysis. We then put together what we call our action plans and the strategies. And then we make sure that communications are in place. And the last part that is super important, it's being social responsible. Meaning this is not something that it's providing only a great economy boost for the destinations that are welcoming us, but it has also to become something that has that sustainability approach in terms of making sure that LGBTQ plus travelers are coming to a destination, but that impact and that growth that is getting into that place is also impacting the local LGBTQ plus community. Communication goes across all the steps that I just mentioned, because press is covering every step of the way. Once a destination or a company becomes committed and starts that journey with us, the press is like there and saying, okay, great, you're committed. Let's see how this is evolving. And I think that is also beautiful, because that is not only allowing travelers to find positive digital footprint when they're doing the research prior to deciding where they travel, and then they are able to say, oh, this destination or this company is working to welcome me better, and therefore I'm going to be able to make a smarter travel decision. But also it's a commitment to show that you're continuously wanting to improve the treatment with the segment. So I think that from the very beginning, the base was actually having that method that we never skip with anyone. That is our non-negotiable. And then the company evolved towards what you just mentioned, the Queer Destinations Committed badge, or the Queer Destination distinction, that has been the revolution for our company and one of the keys behind our growth.
I can see how, having traveled myself to and worked in the tourism and hospitality industry for the last more or less 20 years, how even at the simplest level of a direct contact from a receptionist to the clients on the other side of the counter, and how that conversation evolved over the years, I see that as an opportunity for everyone in the industry to observe that there are situations where there are realities where there is no growth. We stay still, we stand as we are and as we've always been, and other locations, other companies, other institutions where instead the conversation has changed and has evolved, and I can see where the travelers go. So as I come from the hospitality industry myself, the private sector, one of the main drivers is always how much money we make, right? And so the hospitality industry will be like, yes, I have my target clients, I have my returning guests, I want to tap into this market to find more clients, to find more guests and sign more contracts. It's always more. So at some point, I started to see the conversation around the LGBTQ plus community and the travel segment as not as social responsibility, as you mentioned, but more as this walking wallet of people that were spending such and such amount of money at multiple times of the year, in many cases even more often than just general families traveling once or twice a year during school holidays, for example. So I hope that the conversation moving forward does not just evolve around how much money the LGBTQ plus travel segment spends, but also around the opportunities to support the community with this segment into the industry that is there to travel, to discover, to develop, and it's not just really walking wallets as I've seen some conversation happening. One of the things that I especially on the podcast and the conversation we've had, a lot of the tourism business that has restarted called for a lot of refocusing, a lot of re-strategizing. Thankfully so, a lot of companies and a lot of leaders have taken the time to say, well, let's just wait a second before starting business as usual. What can we do more or better or different? And especially in your travel engagement, and then you've been asked to travel a lot and go and speak to many events and really share the message of the travel segment that queer destinations represent. What surprised you the most in, I want to know the good and the bad, the good surprises and the bad surprises since travel restarted?
That is a very interesting question because, of course, our company stopped and was put on hold, like the whole tourism industry. But we try to continuously working to be useful for our sector, and our way to do that was actually making sure that the LGBTQ plus tourism was understood as one of the key elements, the key cornerstone of the recovery. IGLTA developed a magnificent survey that was so useful for governments, destinations, and companies to understand what we already knew, that LGBT plus travelers are among the first ones to travel again after any crisis. We saw that after the 2008 crisis, after 9/11, and the pandemic was no different. And putting numbers into that, and on that survey, there was over 16,000 travelers replying. We saw there was a strong sentiment on wanting to travel anyways. And governments, destinations, and companies understood that when families were not traveling, business travel was stopped, queer people continued traveling. And that was a shift on the mindset and priorities of the people leading the industry. And they started asking themselves, wow, if we are not doing any kind of sensitivity for this segment, if we don't have products adapted for them, if we don't have any kind of marketing strategy or materials for that, or any sales or positioning strategy for our companies, and they're coming into this level, and they're such an important client for us, imagine what could happen if we put the same amount of energy, budget, and strategy into this segment. So that shifted for us. Queer Destination started working on developing LGBT plus recovery tourism plans post-COVID with governments like Mexico, with them, different destinations in Spain, and different companies that are leading the industry. And that was a magnificent change for that, because now we're not a segment that is second tier, but it's actually something that is so important for them. Would we make sure, and coming into your question about good surprises and bad surprises, is that everyone was rushing into the need of getting the coin, right? Making sure that they're getting the return on investment. But we had to make sure that we are never jumping our method. We don't care how much money you have. We don't care how big of a company you are. You will follow the method that makes sure that you're doing things for the right reasons. So I think that putting sensitivity on the base of anything prior to any marketing conversation is key for us. We don't help anyone from the marketing perspective or the sales perspective unless they have gone through sensitivity. And we require 100% of the staff to go through sensitivity training and to continuously work on making sure they have all the tools to welcome LGBT travelers again. And then, of course, that shifted a lot for us. And then we started working and expanding every time more. And listen, I understand. It might be tough sometimes, especially in countries where LGBT plus rights are there for many years. People have in their unconscious mind that this is something, oh, I have gay friends, I have gay family, I have no problem with it. But it's not about you having a problem. It's about looking for excellence and making sure that you are on the top level of your game, making sure you're providing safe experiences for LGBT plus travelers. And society has changed. And getting into first the power of the segment in terms of volume, UNWTO expects for 180 million LGBT plus travelers being all over the world in 2030. The question is, what are destinations and companies doing to tap into that market, making sure that they're doing it in the right way? And I think that understanding that, you go down into the complexity. Society has evolved and the LGBT plus community has evolved, and you need to make sure you understand what is the LGBT plus community and how we are supposed to be treated. And again, this is something that is new, right? So you have to get into the details. I have a book published with Planeta, one of the biggest publishers in Spain and in Mexico. And my book is called Now That You Already Know. Everything that I would love to have known before coming out of the closet. And me, that I've been working on the segment for over 10 years, speaking all over the world, I understood by writing that book that there were so many realities that are outside my daily life in the community that I was not fully understanding. And that was the key element of understanding that we have to make it easier. Because if me, that I dedicate my life to this, I still have doubts sometimes. What can I expect from people working in the tourism industry, from other generations that are not part of the community? We have to make it easy for them. And that is the reason why we developed that. And I think that during the pandemic, that click was what motivated us to make sure that, yes, we're going to help any government and destination and company all over the world to tap into this market, but making sure that they're doing it for the right reasons, in a genuine way, without jumping any steps. So for good and bad surprises, the good ones would be that there was this like strong feeling of importance, and we finally got onto the spotlight and given the attention that we are supposed to be given, just for the power and volume of our segment. And the bad surprises was, of course, the rush that so many companies and destinations wanted just for the results, without wanting to actually go through that process that we enforce. I would say that there were like the good and bad surprises, but overall has been great for us. The pandemic was really a wake-up call for the tourism industry to understand that this is a non-negotiable anymore, and that if they're not doing it, they're late, and that this is a run for making sure that not only you're going to be competitive in terms of the economic power that this can give you, but the whole cultural, social, and the amazing approach that the queer community brings into a destination is something that is important to you as well.
I can't help by asking, listening to you about the way some companies or institutions wanted to sort of jump to the financial benefits of it rather than going through the whole process. Have you found yourself, like, did you find yourself in the position of refusing clients?
Oh, yes. We do that all the time. But as we grow and as companies and destinations see their competitors doing the right thing, they're left with no option but on doing that. Because what we're giving is visibility to those that are doing it right. And the ones that are not following through, I would say the train of LGBT plus tourism has left the station. We can help you catch the last wagon if you trust us and you're fast enough. Otherwise, you have to wait and catch the next train, but the main competitors are already there and you will never be able to catch them. So we don't work onto convincing anyone. We don't spend a single moment onto working with someone that has it not clear. If on the first meetings there's something off, we make sure that we make clear for them that this is a path that is non-negotiable, and unless they are tapping into it quickly, we just move on to the next one, because this is a big wall. There is a huge opportunities for us right now, and we have to prioritize. We only work with the people that really want to work with us, and that is like, I think, a shift. Because for many years, we had to work and spend so much time and energy saying, hey, you should target LGBT. Look at this survey, look at this statistic. And now things have shifted for us. So I think there is a golden era, and it's a very sweet moment for us when we get to choose who we work with.
Which doesn't come without the other side of the coin as well. Because if it's, as you call it, the golden era, it means there's a lot of attention around it from the consumer standpoint, from the industry standpoint, so from all over, basically, which means that many organizations or private or public, I hope not public, but at least the private sector decides to go ahead and look like they are LGBTQ plus friendly and put together some sort of communication campaign or strategy to make it sound like they've gone through an internal, change, cultural change, and therefore like some trainings as well, even without being in touch with queer destinations, not necessarily being in touch with them. So this creating what we call today the rainbow washing. So all that nonsense talk that happens around the world that makes people think in a certain way when actually the work behind the scene hasn't been done. And this is something that Queer Destination also works towards, like acts as a sort of the police of the situation, where you spot these fakes, right? And you work towards unveiling this type of washing. And what are the activities that you do to make sure that people understand when we're talking about rainbow washing and when it's actually authentic?
So for us, this is a very interesting conversation, because when pride starting to become a thing for companies, at the beginning we were amazed, right? Like to see support, open support from big companies on pride. That was amazing for us. But then like we started asking ourselves, oh, what are those companies doing outside pride? And what is the actual reason that is driving their interest onto us? So queer travelers are very smart, and we really tap into understanding who is actually doing something to welcome us better. And prior to us taking a decision, a purchasing decision on what is our next holiday going to be, we do a ton of research. And that research is the one that is allowing us to make that decision. And I think that we already know what does it mean to be LGBT plus friendly. And our take might be the most conservative, and I don't mind. I'd rather have less partners, but that are fully committed, than having that discussion that at the beginning of the Queer Destinations Committee distinction, there was this whole talk about how much of the percentage of the total workforce of a company should go through a sensitivity training to be able to be provided a badge that recognizes them as compromised to welcome LGBT travelers on the best possible way. And that was a huge conversation, and companies had their say, and it's like, oh, only the guest facing, or well, that for us was a non-negotiable. And right now it is something that is being enforced by us, and we require 100% of the staff going through it. And it's not something only for the segment, not only for the traveler, it is also a protection for the companies, because at the end of the day, homophobia is out there, and there's so many unconscious bias that some sort of discrimination could happen into any business, no matter how much sensitivity you go through. It can happen at any given moment. The difference is, does the company have the ability to show that this is something that just happened, but they were putting situations and processes into place to avoid that to happen? And are they able to show that their compromise is legit and genuine? So by actually enforcing that 100% of the staff goes through it, we're actually making them a favor, because at the end of the day, they're protected on being able, hey, we're sorry that this happened. This is what we're going to do to make it better for you. But just for you to know, this is not a joke for us. 100% of our staff always goes through sensitivity training, and therefore our commitment is pure and genuine. So I think that for us, this is a key. There are initiatives out there that are talking about LGBT certification or training that requires only one person of the property to go through training. That is, for me, misleading the traveler into thinking they're going into a place that has been doing any kind of effort to welcome them better. And I think that my main passion behind the project is that by doing that, we're not only making sure that travelers are treated better, it's also shifting the dynamics of the workplace, the way that the workers are interacting. Queer people that are working in tourism companies that go through sensitivity training are showing a much more level of happiness, productivity, and we're seeing that this is impacting also the way they work. They provide a more genuine treatment to travelers because they're more happy and they're more themselves. Jokes stop within the teams. And therefore, it's a project where the traveler is happy, the workers are happy, owners are happy because we know that there is that return on investment from a money perspective, but it's also putting them on the right side of history, doing the right things with the community. And then governments are happy as well because this is actually making them progress, not only from a business perspective or a tourism perspective in terms of numbers, but it's also shifting society. Every person that goes through a training are parents, family, cousins, friends of LGBT people, and they don't disconnect that knowledge that they acquired when they go into their lives. So they become members of a society that turns to be more open and more diverse. And for me, I'm looking into that as a way to elevate human consciousness. And behind our expansion plan, there's like that gap where we are changing an industry, but at the end of the day, we're also helping to progress on society. And I think that is a beauty behind the project, and the reason why we are really enforcing that this is something that it's not a joke for us. It's so important, and I'm so glad to see the support of governments like Mexico or Spain at the national level. We sign with the ministers, and then companies. We work with Hyatt, Marriott, Palladium Hotel Group, Melia Hotels International. All the big brands are working with us, and I think that huge support is actually something that is, motivating us to continue going.
Where do you see, you touch base on, you just mentioned a few countries and a few organizations, private organizations around the world, but where do you see more resistance? In what part of the world you see more resistance in, whether it comes from the private sector or the public sector?
So it depends. We have an agenda. The ideal approach for us is signing with the Minister of Tourism, then the Ministries of Tourism work together with us and IGLTA to develop a strategy nationwide. And then they ask what destinations in the country are interested on welcoming LGBT travelers. So that first filter is actually providing us a connection with the destinations that are wanting to work. So even though some regions around the world might not be fully into it, on those, we work only with those that are seeking our help. So we don't find resistance per se on that level just because of that approach. And then every destination, in order to become queer destinations committed, they must have what we call the minimum viable product, meaning every destination that is queer destinations committed has to have an array of companies that have gone as well through the sensitivity training and therefore are also queer destinations committed, meaning then destinations are asking on the private sector, who wants to work with the segment? So we can get as a destination that distinction. And again, we don't see resistance because we only work with the ones that are interested in working. So what I think that on that level is that, first of all, there's an importance for the traveler to be able to say, okay, in my next travel, if I go to Mexico, what destinations are doing something to welcome me better? And within those destinations, what set of package I should build without leaving the distinction to make sure I don't interact with anyone in my vacation that hasn't gone through a sensitivity training. And I think that level of resistance comes into, this is our perfect strategy, but it's not always like that. Sometimes governments are distracted and they're not so focused and they don't want to tap into following their rules. We don't care. Then we go to the private sector and we ask our partners, hey, we're going to open this destination. What companies, what properties do you have in this segment? And we start working with the private sector. And what happens, and the beauty of it, is the moment that the private sector is organized into that direction, then governments want to tap into it and say, hey, this is us. This is also us. Let's take the picture and let's push for it. So our approach is, we don't care. We have a strategy, we have a goal, we have an agenda. If the ideal process that I told you, top down, works, fantastic. If not, they will come along at some point. And then we just make sure that we create momentum in a destination, but we always make sure that we get our objective. And so far, this has proven to be successful. Of course, I would love for governments to, just follow through from the very beginning. But I think that after having companies of the size of and importance of the ones that are already trusting us, and after having ministers of tourism like Spain and Mexico, who are leaders in the tourism industry worldwide, we're now finding it a lot more easier to not have that resistance. But to your point, we don't mind. We make sure that our agenda is being achieved, regardless of the resistance. And I think that sometimes there are different approaches when we have countries that are more developed in terms of LGBT rights. This might look in the beginning, oh, we don't need that. We're past that. And as a founder, I always had that fear of like, this would be needed here still in Spain, in Amsterdam, in New York, and providing the first trainings myself on those markets. It's a way for me to actually get into understanding that this is not only needed, but actually something that it's urgent. Because despite LGBT rights being of progress in many places around the world, laws only change the constitution, but it does not change people's minds. So society could only be changed by education, and this is not something that is being taught in schools. So we are left with that important work to continuously doing it. And even though at the beginning we find some resistance, especially in developed countries where they might think that this is past, the moment they tap into it a little bit deeper and they understand that there's over 10 countries right now where official passports already have a third gender identification option, when they see that their booking engines does not even offer the ability to process that documentation upon check-in, and that we are left into so many gaps when we talk about trans and non-binary identities, inclusive language, pronouns. It's a whole world that has not been discovered yet. So we have enough tools to show them that this is not something about you being a homophobe if you're not fully ready for it. It's about understanding that society has shifted, and there's an opportunity to understand this from the perspective that this is a new part of the industry. And I think that a part of being able to understand that is that we developed together with University of Barcelona the first ever LGBT tourism master's degree. It's online, it's in English, and it's showing that the industry is shifting and that people in the tourism industry can start understanding that there is a career they can follow through onto that. And that is, I think, one of the most beautiful things, like having that wake up moment where we're showing value, where everyone wins. And I think that the key element of our growth is that our essence and the passion behind the project is that everyone wins. This is great for everyone in terms of, yes, economic development, yes, cultural enrichment, yes, social development and responsibility. Also, of course, from the dynamics that are being put into the workplace. And what's more important to me, providing safe and excellent experience to queer travelers anywhere we go. We don't want anymore to just go into LGBT places, LGBT hotels. We want to have that level of treatment and feeling of security anywhere we go. And I will not stop until I achieve that. This is my passion. This is my bigger motivation. And now seeing that not only we have support from governments and companies, but also from the actual consumer, the people, it's just motivating us just to continue pushing.
And what else it's on the plan? Like, what's in the pipeline that you'll continue to work on?
So this is something I'm very excited about because this project started with me going with a PowerPoint presentation hotel by hotel and training a small group of executives. Now it became an online platform that is tapping into hundreds of thousands of people and changing those mindsets, right? And we started with hospitality in terms of accommodation, hotel companies, but now we are already shifting into a lot more. We have Hertz, which is car rental. So if you go to Mexico, for instance, there's over 160 spots all over Mexico in all the airports where when you go and rent a car, you're able to know that treatment you will get, and you're able to provide feedback on the sticker with the QR code, which is beautiful. I think that what we are moving towards now is the B2C approach. Now travelers are able to scan a QR code that is unique to every business and property they're visiting, making sure they have a role into this, making sure that they are able to help as well by providing honest and private feedback on how they could do things better, they're actually helping the next traveler to have even a better experience. They're helping the business that is doing something to welcome them better actually get their insight and their feedback. And it's a collaborative and community approach to that. So we are really focusing on that and then diversifying onto more. I cannot announce the names of it yet, but I can tell you that we are expanding already into transportation, trains, airlines, nightlife, music festivals. It's just going into what is the whole experience that a traveler wants to actually live in a destination and making sure that we are expanding that level of security as much as we can. So I think that the future for us is diversifying into a lot more within the tourism industry. Restaurants are a big part of it as well. We have some big announcements about restaurants as well. So I think that our goal is very clear. We want to make sure that LGBT plus travelers are able to find the right information towards how to travel into places that are doing something to welcome them better, and to give their money to the companies that are able to prove the commitment that is genuine and authentic to welcome them in the best possible way. And I think that this is going to be shifting the way queer travelers all over the world experience travel. And our motivation is to take this as big as possible. And of course, by now having Edgar Vegalar as the new CEO of Queer Destinations, who is a leader in the industry and a person that I respect so much and that I learn from every day, that expansion plan is now something that it's going to be amazing, because we work together with Deloitte within their program Start Me Up. They chose our project as one of the ones that are actually helping sustain under growth. They validate our business model so it's scalable. They help us with our expansion plan. So now having Deloitte and the new CEO Edgar Vegalar pushing for this, and me just continuously supporting as a founder, the sky is the limit. And I want to make sure that we're getting to Asia, Asia Pacific, US, the rest of countries of Latin America. So I think that the next years for us to come is to take this as big as possible, and so excited about it.
Makes me even more excited to start planning our next conversation on the podcast, because it sounds like you have a lot on your plate and a lot more to talk in the coming months. So open invitation to come back whenever you can and whenever you want. This will always be a platform that will, as in the faithful to the name of the podcast, Truth Behind Travel, will bring conversations to the industry, to the industry leaders, so to the B2B sector, but also to those travelers who want to travel by learning more about the industry. It's not exactly your Wanderlust podcast, but it's a podcast that tells you what is going on in the industry. So if you're a traveler and you're listening to this podcast, you know what are the conversations that people are having behind closed doors of the industry, right? So which is important, makes you go about your choices in a much more mindful way, I would say. Thank you so much, Oriol. I know we can go ahead and keep on talking, and I have at least 10 more questions in my head that I want to ask you, but I'm conscious of the time. And I thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope our paths will cross again soon for all the endeavors and adventures that you have ahead of you. I wish you best of luck.
Thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. And definitely there's so much to talk about, because I believe that truth behind travel is something that is allowing travelers and companies understand how to navigate this industry in the best possible way. So I think all those insights are very valuable, and so happy to be able to share with you. And thank you for you to providing that platform.
Thank you for joining me today. Oriol couldn't have said any better. Education is the key to build a more resilient tourism for those working in the industry and for those traveling. All the links to learn more about queer destinations are in the show notes. And I truly encourage you to dive in and learn more about the incredible work that they do. Thank you for being here and support the podcast always. Don't forget to share a review or get in touch with me to share your feedback. Bye for now.